can we instill in our lives, in our families, bravery, character, and leadership? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant during this special Veterans Day weekend episode with special guest, Dr. Jennifer London. She maintains leadership roles in a number of organizations. She is leading a major effort in educating and empowering Americans to be active citizens through greater understanding of our nation's early history. Dr. London has numerous professional publications to her credit, including Ever Vigilant, Leadership and Legacy by the Executive Chairman of CACI. And she co-authored that with Dr. J. Philip London. So I am excited to have you here today, Dr. London. Welcome to Flourish-Meant.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'm so honored to be able to talk about veterans today.
In the second half of our conversation with the amazing and wonderful Dr. Jennifer London, we're going to dive into some practical ways that you can seek out modeling bravery, character, and leadership in your homes. Dr. London, what is one way that families can begin to learn instilling those values of bravery, character, and leadership in their homes this Veterans Day and beyond?
Well, there's not a lot of inspiration out there, I'm sorry to say. One of the reasons my husband and I worked on this book called Profiles in Character is because today a hero is typically something on a Marvel, movie program or a celebrity. And, celebrities have notoriety, influencers, people on the internet and so on. They have notoriety, but I wouldn't consider them heroic. And so I think we do need to look harder to find people that show real bravery and heroism. And certainly they're in the military, but the military are hard to find when it's only less than 1% of the population, right? But as I mentioned, the USO, I think, does a great job. I recently spoke with the spouses of the USO because the spouses of active duty have a great deal of difficulty in getting and sustaining a job or even an education because of the frequent deployments. And so it puts them in a sort of a holding pattern in their own careers. And so that's a challenge. And as I mentioned earlier, many active duty have difficulty transitioning to civilian life. So anyone who has the capacity to support, the spouses or active duty in transitioning to jobs, I think should step up and offer to help in that transition or to help provide some guidance with how to go about finding, active or at least temporary, employment. So going back to it, Ever Vigilant, my husband talks a bit about his experience in the military and how honor, courage, commitment were so important to not only his everyday life, but what he practiced in his career and what he tried to instill in his employees. Role models, mentors are so important in profiles in character. We go all the way back to Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. We talk about Martin Luther King, Billy Graham, faith leaders. A number of presidents are covered. Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, Reagan, Truman, Eisenhower, and so on. But also Civil War individuals, Harriet Tubman, Robert E. Lee, and Frederick Douglass. And we identified what we thought were characteristics that really drove them in their success through challenges, but also helping them through their successes. Susan B. Anthony, who for, years worked to get the women's right to vote. And it wasn't passed until about a decade after she had passed away. It was supposed to be the 16th Amendment. It became the 19th Amendment. Jonas Salk, the development of the polio vaccine, his altruism and wanting to help the world. I think people will find inspiration in our book, but I hope it also encourages everyone to look at themselves and identify what characteristic really would help them in driving their success. And my husband was interviewed by the Washington Post, I think it was 2005, and was asked what his most characteristic character, that's the way they put it, was. And he said determination. And it was clear that that had a large part to do with his successes and how he navigated the world. He had a lot of character building experiences in his life that he talks about in Ever Vigilant. And these vignettes of the 16 Americans that we talk about, that I believe are real heroes that we need to look to. They're in the past. And again, because our world today isn't providing a lot of inspiration, I think they will help, generate some thinking for those readers about what characteristic they have that will help them, that they can fall back on, whether it's persistence, determination, tenacity, altruism, vision, and so on. And I think that's one way that we can all think about how we can develop our own sense of bravery. All of the individuals in Profiling Character were brave, and some showed a different level. Frederick Douglass we consider fearless. Harriet Tubman was audacious. Truman had immeasurable courage. And what was unique about Truman is he served in the military. So when he thought about the atomic bomb, he considered the casualties that would be incurred by an invasion because Japan was not surrendering, versus, dropping the atomic bomb. And he prayed on and he contemplated, but he made that decision alone. And if you can imagine the courage, the same with Eisenhower, and I speak about them because, they were veterans. And again, hopefully veterans that would provide inspiration. Eisenhower wrote the famous memo that was found after D-Day, taking responsibility in the event that the invasion failed. And in that memo, he said, if there is any blame, it's mine and mine alone. And so we look at Eisenhower as a good example of someone who took accountability, who took responsibility. And today we see a lot of people who want to blame other people for things that are happening around them. And I think he's a great inspiration for someone really, can you imagine how many people he could have blamed, and the massive invasion with, thousands of ships and planes and people. He could have blamed the weatherman, who, because of all the, weather at that point that was, they had to delay it a day. But, he said, and he wrote that note before every amphibious event. He wrote the note in case he had to submit it. And I just find that so admirable. And so I point to that as another example of how we can look to our own bravery, our own, characteristics that help us drive our own success and help us through whatever challenges we might have in our everyday lives.
I'm hearing you say something that is resonating with the spirituality piece of who we are according to what God calls us to be. And it's based in God's love. And love is the opposite of fear. So love being our why and our reason to do things will push us through some of the things that would normally give us reason to turn back. And that is the essence of courage and character and accountability and all of those things that you're discussing, is making sure that you have your why in place and you are determined to persevere no matter what comes against you, because what you're doing matters more than just yourself.
And I think that's really relevant to Martin Luther King. We identified love as his predominant characteristic. He was about peaceful resistance And he actually relied a bit on Gandhi's teaching called Satyagraha. Satya means love or truth, and agraha means force. And Martin Luther King was fascinated by the idea that this idea of love could be beyond, as you mentioned, Martin Luther King's understanding of Jesus on an individual basis, but it could be applied to society in general. And so, if you listen to Martin Luther King's speeches and the way he approached, civil rights, it was always peaceful and from the position of love. And it's interesting you bring that because there's a lot of strength in that position. So I'm glad you brought that up because you're right. Love does include bravery as well.
And it includes how we need to respond to and support those who are often ignored or dismissed or not recognized in the veteran population. And if we were to reach out to them and say, I see you, you matter to me, you matter to God, that might be an important piece of suicide prevention in our communities that we're missing.
And I would say again, finding for those who are struggling, finding mentors or role models is important. I mean, looking at these historic figures, many of them had mentors, role models, or family life that helped support them. And I would encourage people to look around their family, their community, and identify those, kind of heroes or mentors in their own life. The other thing a thread that runs through all of these individuals is many of them had a very strong faith. And that's another way. I mean, this is another thing that bolsters us, having that faith. And in my life, I would say there are people that believed in me and they found me. But we can also seek them out. I mean, there are other ones that, I sought out, but I just found it interesting that there are people in my life that found me and said, I'd like you to do this, or can you do this, or whatever. And I would also encourage everyone to explore every opportunity presented. I mean, that's what I did. You never know what opportunity might lead to another great circumstance. And sometimes we'll tell people, oh, I'm not interested in that, or no, that doesn't sound like me, or whatever. But I found that really led to great opportunities that you wouldn't think about. So again, I would encourage everyone to not dismiss something, but explore it. You never know where it's going to lead.
Dr. London, how can people access your resources and the books that you co-authored and all of the things that you would provide for them and link them to that would help them establish bravery, character, and leadership in their families?
Well, for each of the books, there are separate websites. For Evervigilant, it's evervigilantthebook.com. And for Profiles in Character, it's the same. It's sort of the same. Profiles in Character, thebook.com. And there's a lot of information, interviews, and more summaries on there. Both books can be ordered on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. There are different versions. There are paperback and there are the regular hard copy books. And Profiles in Character is a great coffee table book. My husband wanted it to be sort of a coffee table size so that it could be utilized in that way. So, and I must mention that all proceeds, I think I mentioned already, but all proceeds from those books go to military organizations.
I hope that all of you listening were inspired by this conversation with Dr. Jennifer London, and you will go and access these wonderful resources and support your local veterans and local veterans organizations as well. And of course, I also hope that you hit subscribe and come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.